everyone, and welcome to another video in my 2021 TBR series. In this video, I'm going to be sharing with you 10 historical fiction books that I hope to get to this year. So historical fiction by far is probably one of my least read genres, just because I'm so particular about the kind of historical fiction that catches my attention, I guess. So I really had to scour my Goodreads list to try and find 10 books to put on this list, but I'm actually really excited about all of the books that I have in this video, and there are two in particular that I am especially excited for, and I didn't really realize that until recently when I reread the synopsis of these books, so I'm kind of really excited to share with you the books on this list. And you will find a common theme in this video, and that is one, World War II stories, oddly enough, even though I mentioned that I'm not the biggest fan of World War stories, but also a lot of these books are actually set in Paris, which is not a coincidence. I am especially drawn to books that are set in Paris. So without further ado, let's jump into the 10 books. As per usual, they are all written down on my phone, so if you see me looking down or reading off of my phone, that is why. So the first book on my list, we're kicking it off with one set in Paris, and that is The Paris Hours. So you'll also notice that I'm going to give you some very vague, like bare bones synopsises for these books, so I'm sorry about that, but if you've been watching my channel for any amount of time, you're not surprised. So this book takes place in Paris, and it is set in 1927, but it is told in a single day, and we're following 4 different characters. So what drew me to this book, besides the Paris part, was one, the cover. For some reason, that like green color on the staircase with like the printed carpeting, it just is especially appealing to my little eyeballs, but also I'm really intrigued by the fact that the book only takes place over a single day, and it really encourages me to want to try and read this book in a day. I don't very often do that, but I would love to try and read this book over the course of just one day. The next book on my list is one of the 2 that I am most excited for, and this book is called The Doll Factory. So this book is set in London in the 1850s, and we follow our main character called Iris, who works in a doll making shop, and I believe we're also following a character called Silas, who after having a very brief interaction with Iris becomes kind of obsessed with her and wants to add her to his collection, and I believe he is a taxidermist. So how this book doesn't have a subgenre of horror, I don't know, but it sounds so good and so creepy, and like it could take a very dark turn. So I am very excited to pick this book up, and I think this is a debut book, and a lot of people I read on Goodreads said that this feels the farthest from a debut book because her writing was just like exceptional, and I think the author has written a couple other books since then, and I think one of them had circus in the title, which automatically caught my eye. So I'm super excited to pick this book up. You have no idea if I haven't made it clear to you already. The next book on my list is called The Immortalists, and this is, I believe it starts in 1969 in New York City, but I think it takes place over many years, and we're following 4 siblings who visit a traveling psychic who claims to be able to tell people the day that they die. So I then think we follow these 4 siblings as they grow up, kind of knowing this information of when they're gonna die and just seeing how they choose to live their life, whether they believe the information or not. I've heard a lot of mixed things about this book. Some people either hate it or they love it. I'm really hoping that I will be one of the people to love it because the synopsis really intrigues me. The next book on my list is called The Paris Library, so we've circled back to the Paris thing, and for this book the only synopsis I'm really going to give you is a little quote from the synopsis thing on Goodreads, and that says that it is based on the true World War II story of the heroic librarians at the American Library in Paris. This is an unforgettable story of romance, friendship, family, and the power of literature to bring us together. So obviously it's set in Paris, which immediately draws my attention, but also I love books about books, and so I believe it's more specifically set in a library in Paris, and it is about, as it says, literature and how it brings us together. So it sounds like a lovely story that could also be very heartbreaking at the same time. The next book on my list is the second of the two that I am super excited for, and this one is called The Miniaturist. So this is set in 1686, and we follow our main character called Nella, who is 18 years old, and she arrives in Amsterdam to begin a new life as the wife of a merchant trader, but she doesn't find her new home particularly welcoming until one day her husband surprises her with a wedding gift, a cabinet-sized replica of their home. And to furnish this gift, Nella enlists the service of a miniaturist who builds all of the like tiny furniture and stuff for the house. And then I think the house starts to mimic what is happening in real life, or maybe like vice versa, I'm not really sure. But again, it's historical fiction with a bit of magical realism to it, I believe. And again, this sounds like the setup to a horror movie. Like, it kind of reminds me of The Haunting of Bly Manor, how the little girl's dollhouse starts to like replicate what is happening in real life. So I don't really know where this story is gonna go, but it sounds super good and right up my alley. I also really enjoy miniature things, which could be another reason why I'm drawn to this book. There's probably like a name for it, but I know I used to have a dollhouse when I was a kid, and I would go to Michael's, and they have like, in any craft store, they always have a section of just like miniature things, and I was obsessed with buying all of those things for my dollhouse. So hopefully this book will live up to my expectations. The next book on my list is actually one that I own, but it's under a stack of a bunch of other books, so I couldn't be bothered to get it out, so I thought I would just post a picture on the screen, which is funny because I was too lazy to take down the stack of books, but then I just made my life a little bit harder in the editing process, so my logic doesn't make any sense. But this book is called All the Light We Cannot See, and this is another World War II story that follows a blind French girl and a German boy whose paths collide in occupied France as both try to survive the devastation of World War II. So once again, we have that theme of World War II stories, and this is also set in France. I don't think Paris, but France. So yeah, like I said, it was a very common theme in this video. This actually isn't a book that I would ever normally pick up, but I heard a lot of good things about it and I found it secondhand, so I bought it, and I haven't read it because the synopsis isn't something that super intrigues me, but I figure I own it, so I should probably read it soon, and I'm hoping it's going to be one like The Book Thief, where I expected not to like that book and I ended up loving it, so hopefully this will do the same thing for me. The next book on my list is called City of Girls, and in this book we follow Vivian Morris as she looks back on her life during the 40s in New York City's theater world. The synopsis of it kind of reminds me of The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, because I think this book is going to largely follow her like romantic life. So I actually didn't really like The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, unlike a lot of other people who absolutely loved it. So I'm kind of hoping that this book will do what that book didn't do for me, because I do really like the idea of books set in like the 40s or 50s, like old Hollywood, even though this is set in New York City, but still. So hopefully I will really enjoy this book, and it has a lovely cover, just saying. Next we have My Lady Jane, and in my notes where I would write the synopsis, all I wrote was, sounds like a good time, because that's basically what I know about this book, is that a lot of people say that it's very entertaining, it's funny, and it's just overall a good time. I believe it is like a retelling of a classic. I'm gonna throw out Jane Eyre, but I don't know if that's the right one. But I do know it's the first book in a series, and I think each one of the books follows like a different Jane. And now I'm thinking, was it like a Jane Austen thing? Or like, I don't really know. I don't know what this book is about, basically is what I'm saying. I just know that I've heard a lot of people say that it's really fun and entertaining. And I feel like it's been a while since I've just genuinely read like a lighthearted book. That being said, I don't know a lot about this, so for all I know it could take a very dark turn, in which case I'm gonna feel like a fool after I read it. But from what I know, it's really nice and lighthearted, so I'm excited for it. The next book on my list is pretty much the opposite of that, and I think it's going to follow a much darker theme, and that is called Prisoner of Night and Fog. This is another World War II story in which we actually follow Hitler's niece, and I think she basically follows what her uncle is doing until, I want to say, she meets a young Jewish boy, and then she kind of learns a new perspective on what she thought she knew. So yeah, I don't really know what to expect out of this book. As you could tell, I don't have a huge synopsis, so I'm not really sure. I haven't heard a lot of people talk about this on BookTube, but the people that I have really liked it, so I'm hoping that I will as well. And then the final book on my list is called Blonde, and this is a fictional take on the life of Marilyn Monroe, but I do believe it does closely follow her actual life. So I don't know for sure, but I want to say the way that it's set up is kind of like following her life the same way that it actually was, but not as a biography and more set as a fictional story, in which case the like dialogue and things like that are going to be fictionalized because obviously we don't really know what they were talking about back then. But at the same time, I'm not 100% sure. It could take a much more fictional turn with her story. I don't really know. I just know that I do really like Marilyn Monroe and learning about her life and reading about her life. So even though this is fictional, I do still think I'll probably get some actual facts out of it. So yeah, those are the 10 historical fiction books on my TBR. Leave me a comment down below. Let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them, which ones you think I should prioritize on this list. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!
Samson.